Welcome to the table, where God feeds the hungry, lifts up the excluded, and overturns injustice.
From unlikely invitations to a promised wedding feast, Scripture reminds us that Jesus' table is a place of justice, generosity, and hope.
This is the Tear Fund Australia podcast.
Come take a seat.
Welcome everyone to week 4 of our Tear Fund podcast together. My name's Joel McKerrow, and who are you?
I am Melody Merton.
It is so good to have you here and good to chat to you again around the table, Melody.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
I've been loving it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I've been loving it as well.
Excellent.
Last week we were over in Africa, and this week we're going to stay in Africa.
We're still there.
We're still there.
It's a good place to be.
It is a lovely place to be.
We're in South Africa now.
We're in South Africa, and we're also going to be gathering around the table. Many of us probably gather around almost weekly sometimes, depending on your tradition, around the communion table.
That's right.
Around the Last Supper.
The Last Supper, the Passover table.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be at that table in the Old Testament and then through to the New Testament and Jesus right before his death.
Great.
Many of you will be listening to this in the season of Lent.
Yeah.
And we're right there.
Yeah.
We're right there.
We're heading towards Easter.
We are. Who are we hearing from today?
Today we're going to be hearing from René in South Africa. René's an Anglican priest. René August is an Anglican priest in the Diocese of Cape Town, South Africa. She works as a global peace building specialist with Tear Fund.
No biggie.
I'd like to have that as my title,
I know.
Global Peace Building Specialist.
It's so cool.
That's really lovely.
Yeah.
Supporting those doing the work that makes for peace. Networking, training, building capacity, and movement building. Have you got to meet René a few times? You got to hang out
I've
with René,
never met her in person, but we've talked over Zoom a few times, and honestly, I could talk to her every day. She has so much good stuff to say.
It's a really special conversation, this one.
Great.
I loved it. There's so many beautiful things that you talk about with her in there.
Yeah. Shall we stop and let her?
I think that'll be way better than us rambling. Let's just listen to her.
Let's do it.
My name is René August. I am a priest in the Diocese of Cape Town. I'm told that's kind of the first thing you say, but anyway. I always tell them, my mother calls me René, so you can call me René.
Beautiful.
I work for an international NGO called Tear Fund, based in the UK. And as my work in Tear Fund, not as my work, I'm employed by Tear Fund UK as the Global Peace Building Specialist. And so that means a whole lot of different things, but essentially it means supporting those who are doing the work that make for peace. If you think of Luke chapter 10, when Jesus sends out the 72, he says, go into the towns and into the villages and go and find those people who do the work that make for peace. I would say in essence, in each region in Tear Fund, there are people who do this on the ground. And one of the things I do is provide support and networking for that group of people, but then also sort of across the peace building, reconciled and peaceful communities, we do a whole lot of other work that involves training and, building capacity mostly of people on the ground to support movement building and ultimately to support the work that makes for peace.
It's great. At Tear Fund Australia, we have talked a lot in recent years about conflict being one of the things that is really driving poverty and having in that place of overlapping crises. It's conflict, communities who are facing conflict on top of instability because of climate, on top of economic shocks and things like that. First of all, the work that you and the people that you work with is so, so important. What would you say about how the current kind of global state of things and increasing conflict is playing into the work that you're doing? I think remembering that there's a difference between peace building and peacekeeping at that kind of humanitarian response level.
Yeah, I think the global scene is quite, in my mind, disturbing at the moment because as you talk about these intersections of the things that create conflict or that create justice, I would say the polarization at the moment politically seems to be a more significant driver than almost anything else. Sorry, there's an eyelash in my eye. Yeah, the politics seems to be such a significant driver of conflict in the world at the moment. But then when you think about the warmongering, you know, and especially because of what is happening, started off with Russia and Ukraine, then Israel Palestine, as people say, Israel Gaza, um, the the narratives that have come out of those conflicts have caused politicians, global leaders, to reduce the amount of money they spend on peace building and increase the money they spend on military.
Defense.
So almost replacing, you know, oh, peace building is not going to help us here. We need to buy more bombs. We need to buy more, weapons. We need to employ more soldiers. Um, and I mean, for me, there is literally no documented evidence that war creates peace in the world. Nowhere. Bombs creating peace? No, it doesn't. It escalates fear and drives conflict. But at the same time, these very wise and learned global leaders are saying, yeah, no, there's, you know, we just got to make sure that we are going to be safe. Now, that's a zero-sum game, firstly. And secondly, it's causes everybody else, the people who have more money, end up with more guns and bombs, which then affects those who are economically impoverished in the world again. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that the reality of climate change reduces resources, creates more scarcity of resources, causes degradation of the planet. I mean, if you've seen any scenes from Gaza right now, like nobody's going to be able to plant food there for, decades. That soil is going to need to recover. We're talking about places where there was lush farming, there was an ocean full of fish. Like the degradation of what's happened to that land is going to create not only starvation, but a shortage of food in the world. And then that's going to escalate prices. And then that's going to create more conflict. We hear what tariffs is doing in the world. It's just like it makes absolutely no sense to me. But it seems like we've got ourselves into this, I don't know what to say, like understanding of what the world is and what the world needs that negates the need for peace. And yet, if there isn't peace, people don't have clean drinking water. If there isn't peace, there's no food production. If there isn't peace, there's no trade. There's, so many other things that we depend on, hinge on the need to have at least some kind of good relationship between neighbors. And so this isolation and insulation from anything and anyone else sadly means that people like me could have jobs for the rest of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Psalm 37, and there's a future for those who seek peace. And all of us have an invitation to consider what our role in that peace is and what narratives even if that's just about what narratives we uphold or challenge. And the fact that you get to work alongside people who are living and working through what that means for their communities when the conflict side of things is very real and very present. I would love to be encouraging anyone who's listening, supporters of Tear Fund Australia in particular, to be praying for this work sincerely, in partnering with you and supporting you in that really important future of seeking peace together. So thanks, René. It's interesting. I'm curious to see where this conversation goes around the table as something for something that can be conducive to peace in times of division and polarization. And I wondered if you could start us off by sharing, if you have a maybe just sharing about a table that's been significant in your own life.
Mm.
Yeah.
The first that comes to mind, significant for me, is actually a table of a friend of mine, or friends of mine, a couple who used to live about 5 minutes away from where I was. And so, as an unmarried woman who has no children, very often like setting a table just for myself just feels like, you know, I'll just grab a plate and eat somewhere.
Mm.
And this friend, they have 3 children, and she just used to tell me, well, she told me on a number of occasions. She said, Rene, I have to cook to feed 5 people every single day. I don't have a choice. It's gonna happen. And her kids were little at the time, and she was a stay-at-home mom, and she just said, I I'll just cook an extra plate of food. It will literally cost us nothing. And it means that you have a plate of food if you need it. If you need a takeaway, just send me a message and I'll put it in a takeaway container. You can do a drive-by. If you just want to come in, sit and eat and go, you can do that. If you want to come sit at the table and share a meal with us, you're welcome to do that. And if you don't come, I'll just send the food to work with my husband the next day, or I'll eat it for lunch. There's going to be no waste,
Yeah.
but basically telling me in no uncertain terms, I have a seat at their family table whenever I want. And I mean, they're still incredibly good friends. This is like 25 years later. Um, but the impact that had on me, to just know that, it's one thing to go, oh, what am I going to eat? It's a whole nother thing. Where am I going to eat? You know? And so knowing that there was a place where food was being prepared, but a seat at the table was being prepared and offered to me, remains a very special thing. And I mean, the kids are all grown up and I'm friends with all of them. And the oldest one was saying to me, my memory of you is that somehow you were always at our dinner table. Um,
Funny that.
um, Funny, you should say that. And I said, yes, well, actually. And then I told him the story, and he was like,
Mm,
oh, I want
mm,
that. Like, that
mm,
was his immediate response, not, you know, anything else, but like he wanted to make his table the same way that his mother had made the table.
mm,
Um, and we both love food very much anyway. So,
mm.
it was like saying, imagine just cooking a meal for someone so that if anybody comes to your house and they didn't eat something, you can just provide
Yeah.
them with a meal and you can sit at a table together.
We talked recently, and you said that you reflected that the table is the place where Jesus really taught theology. What do you mean by that?
Um, I think so. I don't think it's the only place Jesus taught theology. I think the life of Jesus
Mm.
is a teacher to us.
Yeah.
All the worship festivals
Mm.
in scripture. When we think about worship today, we think about a band, a music set, people raising their hands, not sitting down and eating together.
Mm.
If you think of the Feast of Tabernacles, the Passover meal, the Shabbat meal, all of these feasts required a table to be set. And the thing that happens at tables is stories.
Mm.
Stories get told. And so if you were ever at a Shabbat meal, the 2 loaves of bread and you only eat on the one. The one isn't, oh, if there's not enough for this meal, we'll start dipping into the next one. Like the second loaf is that God provides enough so that we can rest.
Mm.
Bread for today. And on the Sabbath, we have bread for tomorrow. I mean, when the Hebrews were wandering in the wilderness and they received manna, It was about table.
Mm.
Also gathering enough for the vulnerable, not gathering too much for waste because it would stink.
Mm.
Waste stinks, greed stinks.
Mm.
And when we read the Gospels, the synoptic Gospels sort of in the story of Jesus, things kind of slow down.
Mm.
Pardon me. Okay, Mark doesn't slow down, so it doesn't slow down as much with Mark. But Luke and Matthew, the Gospels slow down at the Passion.
Mm.
Jesus enters Jerusalem. And then the drama sort of gets larger, and the cameras zoom in on the minuscule acts from particular angles, and all the other dynamics that's going on all come to bear on this power hub, and the location of the gathering of Jews from all over the world, in preparation for this Passover feast.
Mm.
They're all coming literally from all over the world to eat a meal together.
Mm.
Why? Because in the meal is a story,
Mm.
and so John's gospel slows down even further to focus on a table.
Mm.
Very often people talk about foot washing,
Mm.
and sure, that is, a significant part of the meal. Jesus stood up from the table, took off his outer garment, put a, towel around him, essentially. The foot washing is the preparation for the table, to be present at the table. You don't just show up and as you say, clear a space and then sit down. Of course, that is a very legitimate form of hospitality and way to be community together. But in this particular story, there's this preparation that is made for a meal. Go and make preparation. Jesus says, how I've longed to eat this meal with you. There's like little details like that. It's just littered into the story. Like there's no other place where we see this much attention to detail as the preparation for a meal. And then to sit, and that this meal now that used to mean one thing becomes a whole nother thing, and the teaching of Jesus around that table is, so often in that particular meal, people would take the bread and they would share it together, this unleavened bread that they ate in a hurry. There wasn't time for yeast and to allow the bread to, proof or anything. And then when they take the cup, they remember this blood of that lamb that was slaughtered to put blood on our posts to save us. Jesus begins to make that the biggest story. My blood. Not that blood, not your blood, not someone else's blood. My blood poured out. My body broken for you. And I mean, Paul obviously picks up this image when he talks about this meal. And he then also calls us the body of Christ, in the world, that we are the ones now who get invited to say, my body broken for you. The imitation of Jesus is a connection to the self-offering love that gives myself for the benefit of the other. I say yes to being broken for peace. I say yes to being poured out. Every time I receive that meal, I connect my story to the story of Jesus, and my yes to Jesus is yes. And I mean, that's the gospel, and it happens at the table. It happens through bread and wine. And And then the other sort of dynamic, I mean, there's manna just literally fell from heaven, but bread is not something God gives us. Wheat is something God gives us.
Mm.
Wine is not something God gives us. Oh, would that not be wonderful? Like grapes is what we get. And so I'm being very Anglican here, but like there's this human divine collaborative that happens when we take the wheat that God gives and we make bread. It's God's contribution and my contribution that creates the bread. It's God's contribution of the grapes, my contribution that makes it wine. So in this self-offering, it isn't just a me thing. It's a we thing. It's a something I do because of what God has given. I'm able to give, you know? Um, and so John spends a lot less time on the, narrative of the passion. Jesus went here, Jesus went there, Peter denied, like all of those things. Um, and I love how it's not a choice. Do we talk about the cross or do we talk about the table? But that we talk about both. The Gospels aren't competing for that, but I think sometimes we overlook, like we want to rush to the cross, and the place where Jesus pauses is the table.
Why do you think we want to rush through that so much? Why are we so bad at just sticking in that place? And what are we missing by moving too quickly past it?
Now there's a question. I'm serious. Like I think that's one of the more important questions that we need to pause to ask.
Mm.
I mean, I have my own ideas, and some people get upset with me about this. I'm like, um, I think pausing requires us to be present. I mean, incidentally, this whole washing of feet connected to peace building, like Judas is at the table, Jesus washes Judas's feet, you know. He is part of the dialogue that happens.
Mm.
And it's not a place that ends in peace at the end of the meal. So, for everything to go smoothly and perfectly, and that's not the point of the meal either.
Mm.
I think the need to like to put on a meal like that, make the preparation, slow down. If you think about family life nowadays, like how many people just grab something on the go, drive-throughs. I mean, it's the complete opposite of a table. Um, and what happens when you do sit down is that there's connection that happens. Um, Again, worship, every festival, every feast, even Sabbath, you start your rest by connecting with the people in your household. You sit at a table together. And so I would flip the question around and say, what happens when we don't? We actually foster the disconnection. And so it's a lot easier for the consumer faith to rather say, oh, we're not going to have communion today because we're going to spend more time in worship. I don't know if you've ever heard that said. I hear it. And it's like saying, oh, we would rather spend time singing the words of some popular dude than repeat the words of Jesus and do the work that Jesus commands us to do. Remember. Most repeated commandment in the Old Testament. Like, remember. Remember the Lord your God. Because we forget. We forget who we are. We forget that we belong. We forget who God is. And so somehow, if we add music and words and sing, about me and my Jesus and my God and my redemption and my sin, we we forget that it's a us, you know. Most of the New Testament is not, the you is not a singular. It's definitely plural. I mean, to talk about a song that came out of Australia, our Jesus, our Savior, Lord, there's none like you. All of our days, we want to praise the wonders of your mighty love. Our shelter, like if we think we're in a storm and it's my shelter compared to our shelter, you know. So there's this I would say consumer faith and individualism that is woven into the fiber of what we call Christianity nowadays. And because that is the case, pausing disrupts the flow. This song must end in this key so that we can go straight into the next one. I hear worship leaders talk all the time.
I'm a worship leader. I know the line.
We'll
That's
do the
exactly
set,
right. Yeah.
then we'll do that, and then while this is playing, it's like we have allergies to pausing. Why? And so the keeping busy so that we don't ever have to face ourselves. Or we don't have to be honest with God. Because we have the next line. Oh, my favorite song. That's not worship, that's singing. So yeah, I sound very judgmental right now about worship leaders. I also lead worship. I'm just saying there isn't a balance anymore. And so what the table does is disrupts the production. We need results. We need to get people to this place or that. It's just, well, what do we have here? Let's be with what really is. And that whole thing about my friends always having a space at the table, like if you imagine God's table, Jesus, the parable Jesus tells about going out and one by one people sending out invitations. One by one they come back, they make excuses, and then the master says, go out into the streets and in the villages and go and bring the blind, the lame, the sick, that there's room for everyone at the table. Like, how do we communicate that to people in a worship song without actually making room? Not to sing about the room we make. Communion, kind of, we all get the same thing. And you are welcome, and you are welcome, and you are welcome. And I don't get to decide who comes to this table. It's the Lord's table. I'm just hosting on behalf of Jesus, who is not only the host, but the meal. And so I'm sounding very Anglican. Wow. My bishop will be proud.
Go with it.
That when we think about tables, we don't necessarily think about coming to worship. But the story of the table can form us in such a deep, fundamental way about who we are. We are the ones who saying yes to being broken for the world, for people we don't know, poured out for the dreams of God. But it's not just me. We are being broken. And so when I feel the breaking more than you feel the breaking, we come to the table to remember this is happening to both of us, to all of us, and we can encourage one another in that. We can tell a story of what that is and feels like and looks like. And And so, yeah, anyway,
Mm. Mm.
I'll pause there.
Pause. Mm. Do you think the season of Lent is an invitation to pause?
The table is a place of slowing down, but Lent is a season of slowing down
Mm.
for me.
Mm.
It's a deliberate, I don't know, choice to not only, do the things of preparation for Easter, but to remember that I'm not created for production.
Yeah.
Like, get this done, turn this out, but that I'm created for living. And then asking the question, so what are the things that bring life to me? What are the things that truly feed me? What are the things that nurture my soul? And who do I do this with? Like, those are the questions that become part of the Lenten journey for me. And journeying into Lent is also about the connection with, okay, so Jesus, how are you my bread of life in this? You know, um, if I was, Jesus tempted in the desert and Satan's like, oh, you could turn the stones into bread. And Jesus is like, we don't live on bread only. Like, what are the other things that I'm not feeding myself with?
Mm.
Um, that the bread is all the other stuff I just consume, but what's the other stuff that I need? So Lent gives me an opportunity to, reflect on that. The other thing I find is that because I'm not going out a lot, I go to bed earlier, I have better sleep, I'm healthier in Lent.
Mm.
Seriously, like,
Mm.
just
Mm.
have less issues. My allergies don't bother me in the same way. There's just a whole bunch of things that happen that my body loves that happens during the season of Lent.
Mm.
And so taking time over the meal, taking time over the preparation. And then Sundays, again, very Anglican. Sunday's a feast day. So whatever you've given up for Lent, you have on a Sunday in celebration to remember the little Easters that point to the big Easter.
What I was hearing you say before is that if everything around us is if we want to slow down, it has to be intentional. It's no longer you have to be intentional about being more productive and having a more paced a more productive pace.
Mhm.
That doesn't require intention nowadays. That just happens by default because everything is geared towards that. The
Yeah.
intention and you have to be so on purpose about withdrawing and going away to a quiet place, whatever that looks like, in your rhythm, in your habits, in your body, um,
Mhm.
and and Lent offers that,
Mhm.
offers that,
Yeah.
and asks us to do that as a follower of Jesus, not just as someone that's trying to do something countercultural. It's
Mhm.
countercultural and in the footsteps of Jesus, knowing that led him to a place of not just of suffering, of laying down his life, in the bigger picture of what God was doing. What does the church need to do differently, particularly in the West? How do we need to think differently about our tables today, in this in these times that we find ourselves in, whether we're talking about global conflict and politics or whether we're talking about our busy lives? What's the invitation or the challenge that you would leave us with, Renee?
I would say the table is the antidote to the things you just mentioned. It's an antidote to a busy life because you have to set it, prepare it, clean it up. The table is the antidote to living at odds with people because it forces you to come and
Hmm.
see who's at the table to connect with one another. The table requires of us to, not only make preparation and be with people, but to get into the connection with the earth and creation, because food is produced, from the earth. And so if you have some carrots that don't look so great, like you go, oh, if you're growing carrots, you'll go, oh, there must be something wrong with my soil. I need to put more fertilizer in, or I need to put some, I don't know, balance the pH of my compost. I don't know what it is, but as the daughter of a farmer, um, our home always had fruit and veggies growing. Everybody else had grass, nice lawns. We had corn and tomatoes and potatoes. It was the height of embarrassment, but I now deeply appreciate it. And so in this, earth to table conversation, regardless of where you get your produce from, in the preparation of the meal is the recognition of what the earth is producing, how it's producing it, who is being impacted, like to think about the person who harvests your tomatoes, um, you know, what kind of, I don't know. There's a whole environmental conversation around food justice, but then also who isn't enjoying this today.
Mm.
That the people who dug these potatoes out of the ground cannot afford to buy potatoes themselves. So yeah, there's a food system conversation that happens internally as you prepare food, and it invites you into that, especially when something is wrong. What's wrong with these tomatoes? What's wrong with these potatoes? What's wrong with this meat? This chicken is a bit scrawny, undernourished chicken. And so there's a bigger ecosystem that also invites me into hospitality. Oh, the worms are eating the potatoes. Oh yeah, the worms actually also need to eat. Jubilee is grow enough food so that the wild animals and the insects have enough food. you know. So yeah, I think the table, like you cannot sit at a table and enjoy a meal and not connect yourself to a global ecosystem. You can't. You might do that, but when you're present to the meal, you're present to a much bigger story that you're part of. And so in this, for me, the spectacles through which I read scripture is the Genesis 1 story of goodness, where goodness resides between things. It's not the birds of the air on day one and God said it was good, and then the fish of the sea and God said it was good. It's that goodness is between the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And when God says, Genesis 1, I think 27 says, and then God created them in God's image, male and female, God created them. And God said it was forcefully good, tov me'od, very good, dynamically good. This idea of dynamic goodness is that something good, a good meal, a good table is not inherent in the table. It's inherent in the relationships between the things that create the table. And so if we are going to, be co-creators with God of things that are dynamically good, then it means that the goodness that we bring produces goodness. That produces goodness. That produces goodness. So when I take ingredients and put them together, the relationship between those things also produces goodness. And then the people I bring to the table produces goodness that nourishes and feeds and then produces goodness in the world and for the world, And so, yeah, I find goodness between things is what justice is. Right relationship between things, righteousness. And when there's right relationships between things, that is what peace is. So we can't separate ourselves out from those ideas when we take the time to pause and be at the table and connect to the things that are there. If we just order and have our food delivered, Uber Eats, tear open the bags and consume, each one gets their own thing. Like, that's the opposite of a table. And so even if it's a peanut butter sandwich, if you sit and eat peanut butter sandwiches at the table, that is the occasion. Maybe I'll end with this story. My friend Matthew was leaving London, and I was living in London at the time, and we were not going to get another opportunity to be together. And so he was trying to finish the things that's, in his house because he was moving. And I just said, oh, we'll just make something with whatever you have in your kitchen. And he said, okay. And then I brought a really nice bottle of wine with me from South Africa. And he was like, oh, this is a good bottle of wine. No, we can't drink it today because it's such a special bottle. We need an occasion. And I said to him, and yet as soon as we open the bottle, we've created the occasion. We ended up having wraps with, I don't even remember what was in the wraps. But the fact that we set the table and opened a bottle of wine created the occasion for the table. And so when you eat a peanut butter sandwich at a table compared to eating it while you're at your computer, you can create the pause. And that's the gift of the table, that it forces us into a different rhythm, like Lent does. And so, yeah.
As soon as you've opened the bottle, then you've created the occasion, right? Oh, what a beautiful way to finish that. I loved that episode.
Yeah.
That story that she finishes with of coming around and of cracking open the wine, and even though it wasn't a special occasion, there's something about it that really struck me. There's something about that idea that something so normal, that's something so everyday, that we so often only want to celebrate the massive moments and the big things, but actually when we intentionally choose to crack open a wine bottle in this sense for her story, but when we intentionally choose to bring meaning to something, then it becomes meaningful, and then it becomes an occasion. I loved how she phrased that. And then in relation to this whole thing around the Last Supper and communion is just a bit of bread and wine, right?
Yeah.
Until we intentionally choose to make an occasion out of it, and then it becomes something so much more.
Yeah.
When we bring meaning, like a symbol is something that we bring meaning to, intentionally craft meaning around, and it becomes so much larger than the form, than the material things. It becomes something that changes our life, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think for all of us, like, we have those symbols, whether it's communion, and for some of us that's an every week thing, and it can become very kind of like, just
formulaic.
Do the thing.
Yeah.
Or a season like Lent, where each year we're offered this season of reflection and paying attention, and maybe sacrifice or fasting or something like that.
Yeah.
That again can become very just like, oh goodness me, it's Lent again, I better give up chocolate or social media or something like that.
Yeah.
But to really show up to those things and sit with them.
I wonder I wonder how our lives would change if we chose to bring such intention to other small, supposedly meaningless things in our life. Like I was thinking the other day, I was making a cup of tea, right? A cup of tea. I just got home. I sat there, I put on the kettle, it's boiling, I put a tea bag in, and it's brewing. This is like 3-4 minutes I'm kind of standing around for. And I can that can be what would we call it? A time that has no meaning to it.
Yeah, you're on autopilot.
You're
right?
on autopilot time, or just with a little bit of intention, I can make that meaningful. Like I'm just thinking about all these little moments in our lives that don't have meaning until we bring meaning to them. Yeah. That imagine our lives if we just intentionally chose in these different moments, when we're driving in a car, when we're making a cup of tea, when we're having these little moments to go, this could be a moment for me if I let it be, if I chose for it to be.
And that's so true of God's people around that particular table of the Passover and the breaking of the bread and the drinking of the wine. If I don't know if you've ever had the chance to be part of a Passover Seder meal before.
No, I haven't actually. No.
We did it for a number of years at the church that I'm part of, and every single element has a story to it, and it takes ages because you have to sit and go through the prayers that are attached to that particular part of the story, and there's the bitter herbs and the salt water that remind you of the tears and the slavery and the waiting and things like that, and there was the bread that's flat because they didn't have time to put yeast in it, and everything had a story, and so you're right. We've taken all of that story out of things, and we have such a kind of a transactional relationship with the things that we participate.
Yeah.
If we choose to, we can pay attention to the story and listen for the story. And I loved the way that she talked about the table being an antidote. She talked about the table being, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read back her quote. Listen to this. She said, the table is an antidote to a busy life. You have to set it. You have to prepare it. You have to clean it up. The table is an antidote to living at odds with people because it forces you to come in, to see who's there, to connect. And it is an antidote to transactional consumption as we connect with the earth and creation and the hands that grew and produced a meal. We can just eat takeaway all the time or, eat on the go. There's so much that's created that we have access to that's created specifically for that purpose. When
be on the go.
You're the busy mum, working mum. Here's this protein thing in a wrapper so that you don't
or non-protein. Here's the Macca's. Here's the KFC.
Yeah, just drive through, wind down your window and grab it as you go through. You don't have to actually stop and be still. So that's an option for us.
Yeah, it is.
Think about that relationally as well. We can just satisfy ourselves or think that we satisfy ourselves with the social media level engagement connection.
Yeah.
But the table is the antidote.
Well, and what's an antidote, right? It's an antidote is the thing that heals you from a poison.
Oof.
And the poison, I mean, let's go there and talk about the poison of social media. Even as we record this, 2 days ago, under 16s now can't use social media in Australia, which, they're going to find ways around. But it's heading in a direction that I think could be a really good direction to head in, that we do figure out how to, not just for our children though, right? Because we know very much that social media is an addiction for us as adults.
Yep.
And that social media in terms of the table and everything we've been talking about as well, that social media forces us into a table that is only filled with our friends.
Echo chamber.
An echo chamber of our own opinions, our own ideas. And so very quickly we start believing our own crap.
Yeah.
Very quickly we get consumed up in thinking that everything we're talking about is the right way to talk about things and we don't begin to see past that. We don't see and learn from, I'm thinking of one of our other episodes, we don't learn from our enemies, from those who are just beyond our level of empathy.
Yeah.
So perhaps it is the antidote as well to our social media consumption.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that it does as well, it wires our brains for the quick scroll, right? The quick hit of stuff, the content is so, fast paced and cut and, and so it kind of wires us for this really quick engagement and an immediate result,
Yeah.
And if I think about the work that has to happen to address the brokenness of our world, like so much of that is the long game.
Yes.
It's the slow burn stuff.
Yeah.
If we think about aid and development specifically, it's really tempting to want to be able to, here's my $50. Let me see the thing that does straight away.
Yes.
It puts a meal in someone's hands. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not going to solve not going to solve poverty. That's not going to lift people out of systems of brokenness and of injustice.
Yes.
But because we are so attuned to the quick fix, it's harder and harder to stay present and to invest in something that is a slow burn or that we might not see the result of in our time, As followers of Jesus, the walk of what what we're called into is participation in this is greater story that has been taking place many, many years before us, that we are called to, come and participate in.
Yeah.
But we may not see the kind of like kingdom fruit that we want to be able to. And we've got to be able to release that to those that will come after us, and release that ultimately to God, who is the one who brings restoration ultimately.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, so charity can be a great thing, giving money to people
100%,
as a good thing, but it can become the fast food.
Yes.
Like it can become actually something that's for us to feel good about ourselves in the moment.
Yeah.
And you know how you feel after McDonald's a few hours later, the bloated. I think that's what it can become. We think, that my engagement with justice in this world is just one of charity. It's just a fast food quick fix. I can throw some money at this problem and then forget about it and feel okay about myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is calling us, and the table is calling us, this antidote is calling us to slow down, to be present, to choose to. I loved how she said feet washing is the preparation for the table that you gather around. That sense, like there was so many things in that culture that led to the moment of the table.
Yeah.
And that intention of servitude, of sitting, of intentionally bringing, like we're saying, meaning and intention to a meal. If we translated that into our lives, that called us to slow down, to be present, to serve those who we invite in, and we gather around their tables to serve them in any way we can. That's the kind of stuff that is the antidote, exactly as she said.
Yeah. So perhaps, Joel, our call to adventure this week is doing some reflection and thinking about what antidote do I need the table to be? What do I need the table to be an antidote for in my life? Is it that I've become addicted to the fast fix and a really like surface level, skim off the surface engagement with issues that are needing a little bit of a deeper look at? Is it those relationships? Is it, a contentedness with the table of social media, and actually I need to just make some time to connect with someone face to face? Maybe it's in our discipleship walk, and I'm satisfied with things just being that kind of like ritual, autopilot. I go to church on the Sunday, maybe I look at this verses, but what's the Holy Spirit really wanting to say in the quiet voice that requires me to stop and sit down and listen?
I think René framed it as the what do you need to be, how can you be present with yourself? How can you be present with yourself this week? And perhaps it is around a cup of tea. Like just this intentional grabbing hold of a moment, and in that moment allowing what God wants to stir in you. And confront you with, perhaps. To what do you need the antidote for? Gee, there's a bunch of things I need, I think, an antidote for in my life. And that's the thing, we just get so distracted, so like, because everything in our world is social media, like social media is the the expression of a whole lot of stuff about how our society is head up, is framed. This calls us to a radical new way of being, a radically different way of being in our society. That's a beautiful and incredibly hard invitation.
Agreed.
But that is the invitation for this week.
The invitation
to work that out.
Next week, we are actually going to be continuing on this theme a little bit, because we're diving into another passage after the Passover with Jesus. Then we're looking at the early church who are in this rhythm of communion and the Lord's table, but it's got a little bit lost along the way.
As it can.
Yeah.
Great. I look forward to that next week.
Me too.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
Then.
Thanks so much for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Tear Fund Australia, a movement of Christians working in partnership to end poverty and tackle injustice. Wherever you're listening, please like, subscribe and share. For more resources, stories and ways to engage, visit tearfund.org.au.